1 a.m., retail stores with a street entrance will be allowed to provide curbside pickup.
I'm ready to go to try and provide what I can for my customers.
It is a big step towards getting back to normal as the province moves to ease more pandemic restrictions. The province will begin lifting restrictions this weekend. It is welcome news to many business owners eager to open their doors, but as Farah Morelli tells us, there are questions about how some neighborhoods will balance physical distancing with long lineups.
For 30 years, Pro League Sports has kept its doors open on Queen Street East. That changed 6 weeks ago.
I can't lie, it's been tough.
For Tex Thomas, the pandemic has been a 1-2 punch. Not only was he forced to close his shop, but sports have all been canceled.
To not have the Raptors kind of going for a second run from what they had last year is huge. I mean, it really is devastating for us at this point.
Today's announcement means Thomas can open again for curbside pickup.
I just think at this point, anything that comes not only for my business, for every other small business out there, it's going to be great.
The province announced it's lifting more restrictions today on businesses.
We are making it easier to support local mom-and-pop shops.
Here's what's changing. As of Friday, garden centres and nurseries will be allowed to let customers inside, so long as they follow certain physical distancing practices. Starting Saturday, hardware and safety supply stores will be allowed the same rules. And on Monday, all retail shops with a street entrance can open for curbside pickup. The province is also expanding the list of essential construction projects. While this all spells good news for retail shops hit hard since March, there are questions about how dense neighborhoods like this will manage long lines for pickup.
How do stores implement rules to allow for curbside pickup but still allow for physical distancing?
We've been speaking to members. It's going to be an issue. I mean, we have narrow sidewalks. It's used to be one of the great things about West Queen West was that intimacy. And we have our businesses, which are pretty narrow.
The province says that'll be up to cities to solve.
We will also be ready to respond to problems if they occur when it comes to lineups outside businesses, for example. Appropriate common sense measures will be taken.
While there's logistics to map out for Monday, Thomas says he's ready. The big question is, are customers ready too?
Do they still feel safe to go out to your neighborhood store to pick up an item or two? So that will be the big thing moving forward.
Farah Morelli, CBC News, Toronto.
After weeks of calls from residents, Mayor John Tory announced today the City of Toronto will begin closing streets to make more room for pedestrians and cyclists.
The active TO plan will create more quiet streets. These will be local routes with traffic calming measures implemented very quickly as to enable local car traffic only and open up more space for cyclists and pedestrians. These routes will be chosen in areas where there is a lack of park space, or conversely, in areas where the routes are close to large parks so as to help alleviate congestion in the parks themselves.
Tory says the rollout will begin soon, and they are aiming for 50 kilometers of quiet streets to start. Part of the plan will be to close entire roads that are next to trails or other hotspots where people tend to crowd. The city is also accelerating the construction of new bike lanes. Tory said some of the changes to streets will be temporary, while others could be permanent. For the third day in a row now, Ontario has missed its target for COVID-19 testing. The Premier is blaming some medical officers of health, but some of those doctors say the province bears responsibility too. Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley has the story.
The ability to do widespread testing for COVID-19 is a crucial ingredient in Ontario's plan to loosen restrictions. The province's current target is to complete 16,000 tests every day. After hitting that target on each of the first 3 days of May, testing numbers have fallen short for the last 3 days in a row.
Start picking up your socks and start doing testing.
Premier Doug Ford put the blame yesterday on some medical officers of health.
Aren't even putting the work in as far as I can see.
Today, Ford is tempering his comments.
Well, let's be very clear. I don't want to blame anyone, and the people of Ontario expect me to push the system, and it's never personal.
The public health units have been told to test all long-term care residents and staff by May the 15th. The province is responsible for testing supplies and the lab system. Some public health doctors say there have been problems with both.
when the province started to expand testing, we had significant shortages of swab supplies. So we couldn't even do more testing if we wanted to.
The supply of swabs is very inconsistent. Some days we are getting 1,000 swab and then we don't get any for a number of days.
The opposition leaders say Ford needs to take responsibility.
He's responsible for funding the labs. He's responsible for, making sure that the capacity is there to get the testing done. And so I don't think it was the right thing to do to throw those folks under the bus. The buck stops with Mr. Ford.
When you are the Premier of Ontario, when you are in that leadership position, it's not simply good enough to express frustration and then blame others when things don't go your way.
It's far from clear which public health units are lagging behind on testing, if any. Ford is not naming names. We asked the government how many tests each public health unit has conducted. Provincial officials said they can't tell us. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada's top doctor points to signs that the epidemic is decelerating.
The daily increase continues to go down. So it has been at about 3% daily increase, and that continues in this sort of slowing trajectory.
Dr. Teresa Tam says the doubling time for new cases is now down to every 20 days. Despite the positive trends, she adds the number of deaths will continue to rise with so many long-term care facilities affected. This was a day of mourning and remembrance for 6 members of the Canadian Armed Forces. They were killed last week when their military helicopter crashed into the sea off the coast of Greece. Today, they were honored during a repatriation ceremony at CFB Trenton. Jacqueline Hansen was there.
The plane came in low, passing over a small crowd of onlookers. When the ceremony started a short time later, the tarmac was limited to close family and some guests, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The proceedings were done in silence, except for military commands and a bagpipe. The lone casket with the body of Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra was carried off of the plane first, followed by 5 pillows, with the headwear of each fallen military member laying on top. One of their bodies has been found, but hasn't yet been identified. It was the family members' first chance to pay their respects to the lives of the loved ones they lost. The ceremony was unlike any before because of COVID-19. Officials positioned themselves to be 6 feet apart, and everyone wore masks. Outside the base, with no view of the ceremony itself, people still stood and waited to pay their respects. The 6 hearses will now travel along the Highway of Heroes to the coroner's office in Toronto. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Trenton, Ontario.
Some healthcare workers say the provincial government is ignoring their demands for better protective equipment.
We know and we believe that there is a direct link between the lack of access to proper protective equipment and the 2,892 healthcare workers who currently have COVID-19 and the 5 healthcare workers who have died.
You are looking at images from a number of protests that took place across the province today. Healthcare workers held up posters with the number 2,892 on them to represent the number of healthcare workers they say have been infected with COVID-19. 5 of those workers have died. The protest was organized by the Canadian Union of Public Employees. The union is calling on the provincial government to provide proper protective equipment to healthcare workers. Ontario will soon begin collecting race-based data from COVID-19 patients.
We have been working on the questions that should be asked, and we're just in the process of getting the questions added to the basic questions that are asked by a health unit. They will be questions that will be answered on a voluntary basis, because, as you said, they're not included in the anti-racism legislation. So it will be voluntary. If the case wants to answer, they will. If they don't want to answer, they don't have to. But we will be starting that very soon.
This comes after data showed an overwhelming number of Black and Latino residents in parts of the U.S. have died of the virus. For example, in Chicago, Black residents make up 30% of the population, but represent more than 70% of COVID-19 related deaths. A few weeks ago, Toronto's Public Health Unit announced they will soon start collecting race-based data. If you have a vehicle with one of those blue license plates, you might have a collector's item on your hands. The plates have been officially scrapped, putting an end to what became a months-long saga for the Ontario government. Lisa Shing has more.
Look, you can read that one, but what the is that?
As they started rolling off the assembly line, people quickly noticed something wasn't quite right with Ontario's new license plates.
Wow, you really can't see that.
Especially at night with a light shining on them. A Kingston police officer complained they were virtually unreadable. Toronto city officials said they couldn't be picked up by photo radar. Now, the Premier has confirmed the new blue plates with the slogan, "A place to grow," and announced with a lot of fanfare is no more. The province is reverting back to the blue and white plates with "Yours to discover" on them.
I'm just not ready to put any more resources towards this.
For a while, the government defended them, and the opposition capitalized on that.
We absolutely have confidence in our plates. She maintains that there's nothing to see here, folks. Well, she's partially right.
Then the province admitted they were deficient, blaming the manufacturer, 3M.
They're responsible for quality control and manufacturing the plates.
Today, the Premier continued to make this promise.
There's no additional cost to the taxpayers on this.
The opposition says that can't be true.
I don't think anybody would believe for a minute that this little vanity journey was without any cost at all.
The whole thing, I think, really speaks to bad decision-making, bad prioritizing, and a degree of incompetence that's just not good enough in a provincial government.
As for the 145,000 new plates that have already been made, they'll likely be used on trailers and other recreational vehicles. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto police have identified and charged these 3 skateboarders for using the Gardiner as a skate park. The video shows the 3 men going for a ride down the Bay York Yonge Street off-ramp.
It's not the time to be taking advantage of our roadways for any reason. That type of behavior could have resulted in a more serious outcome had a vehicle collided with the skateboarders in question.
The 3 men have been charged with skateboarding on a prohibited highway and fined $110 each. An update on our furry friends who've made the beaches boardwalk their new home. The city put up new barriers this morning to protect the fox family and discourage people from stopping or interfering with them. Bylaw officers are also patrolling the area to help protect the foxes and also ensure public safety. They are cute, but we've still got to leave them alone in their habitat there.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot they've chosen,
yes.
but I'm glad we're doing our part. We're going to protect them and let them kind of take over there. And speaking of protection, if you do have some plants that you can still, bring in, or maybe some tender vegetation that you can put something over, if you're still in that kind of a shape to be able to do that, it's a good idea tonight because of a frost advisory. All the areas you see here in blue, so Niagara, it includes the city of Hamilton, goes back towards Sarnia, Chatham, Kent, and these points in between. And I'll tell you that typically we don't see frost. I mean, it happens, but it's just not typical after about the 30th of April for Toronto. And so when something like this is occurring, then it's best to put out an advisory so it doesn't catch anyone off guard. Well, we do have high pressure that's building in tonight. It's clearing the skies out, so there's no insulation from any cloud cover, even though it was into the mid-teens with some of the temperatures today up into cottage country. We're not going to see that heat held in. So tonight, those temperatures will be falling off, if not to freezing, then very close to it. Current temperatures right now, Barrie at 12 and Toronto at 12, Hamilton 13, and St. Catharines, you're coming in at 12 degrees as well. After the clear skies tonight, tomorrow, just know things are going to change up. We're actually going to see some showers developing. They'll be scattered and light in nature, but into the later morning and afternoon hours, that risk is certainly there. So if you have anything essential you need to be outside doing or going to, then you'll want to know you'll need that umbrella, okay? Overnight tonight then for Toronto, we're going down to 2 degrees, even though it'll be freezing in Hamilton and closer to Niagara around 1. Tomorrow afternoon, 12 degrees with those scattered showers. That colder, even colder than tonight, air is going to still be coming in. I'm going to tell you about that. We might set a record coming up, whether we want to or not, Dwight.
Good staying inside weather. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Weather Update is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. Take advantage of special offers now. It's hard to stop a Trane.
The City of Brampton has added 10 new bylaw officers to ensure that residents abide by the physical distancing measures of COVID-19. A total of 42 charges were laid in Brampton just this week. That includes many for one large gathering.
7 charges being laid for a gathering in the plaza parking lot. When the officers arrived, they observed over 30 vehicles and not practicing their social distancing.
The city is asking residents to stay inside and follow the rules, or you will get fined. There are more than 1,200 cases of COVID-19 in Brampton, with 44 deaths. In order to keep people home and less tempted to gather with friends, the city of Mississauga has decided to ban the use and sale of fireworks.
We generally see communities and neighborhoods coming together for firework displays over the Victoria Day weekend. We know they pose a fire risk, and we usually see an increase in both emergency calls and complaints to 311. Right now, we need to keep our firefighters and our enforcement staff focused on the task at hand, and that's fighting COVID-19, period, and full stop. And thank you for joining.
The city of Mississauga has almost 1,500 cases of COVID-19 and has reported 106 deaths. The LCBO will start extending store hours next week. Right now, liquor stores have been on a reduced schedule of 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Tuesday through Saturdays. Starting Thursday, May 14th, next Thursday, hundreds of stores will open at 10 a.m. and close at 9 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday. Now, the LCBO says most stores will be open on Sunday from 11 to 6, adding all stores will remain closed on Mondays until further notice. Do you have some empty bottles piling up? Well, instead of taking them back for a refund, a family in North York is asking you to donate them. They've started a bottle drive to raise money for their local hospital. Greg Ross has the details.
This storage locker filled with bottles and cans is headed back to the beer store, with all the proceeds going towards the Humber River Hospital Foundation. It's the second load in less than 2 weeks.
The first pickup that we got was about $400 worth of empties, so we figure about 2,000 or so bottles.
Andrea Wooland and her husband George Diavalitzis and their 2 kids, Sia and Xander, started the drive when they realized they had bottles piling up in their basement. They figured others in the neighborhood would as well.
So we just actually rallied our neighborhood together and went with a wagon and asked people for their empties.
Initially, they were storing them in their driveway, but the response was so overwhelming, they moved to the Safe Storage Depot on Wilson Avenue, just down the street from the hospital. The storage company not only donated a locker, they made it easy for anyone else to come and donate.
There's a door that's left open during the day. People can pull their car up to that door and they can just pop it open and shove their empties in the lock.
And that was perfect for this man who just happened to have a few extra empties today.
Actually, I have some tequila bottles from yesterday. It was a Cinco de Mayo. Everyone's trying to do their own part to help out their neighbor and their friends and even people that they don't know.
Even the beer store is getting in on the act, agreeing to send a truck to pick up what turned out to be some pretty big loads.
Yeah, for them to do by themselves, no, super hard. So, we're glad to be here and help out. And help out for the cause.
Diavalitsi says it's given him some motivation to have a few extra drinks.
You've been one of the biggest donors to this place.
Any case of Sleeman draft is definitely mine.
Of course, you recommend that everybody do it responsibly.
Please do.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, we dig into new research around the possibility coronavirus can be transmitted through the air. Plus,
as healthcare providers, I think we have an obsession with numbers as we go through this pandemic. We don't often think as much or share as much about these stories and what actually humanizes this experience.
And how frontline workers are swapping their stories of the pandemic. That's coming up next. We are learning more every day about the spread of COVID-19. Experts believe the virus is carried in droplets from infected people, and physical distancing is seen as the best defense against transmission. But as Nicole Ireland explains, some new research suggests that may not be enough to protect against infection.
Most experts agree that COVID-19 spreads through droplets when people come in contact with each other. Those droplets fall to the ground quite quickly. That's why staying 2 meters apart protects people against infection, but sometimes even smaller droplets become aerosolized or airborne and travel further. Researchers in China say they detected traces of coronavirus in bathrooms in high-traffic areas in Wuhan hospitals that got there through the air. Although we have not established the infectivity of the virus detected in these hospital areas, their paper says, we propose that SARS-CoV-2 may have the potential to be transmitted via aerosols. But what they detected were simply pieces of the virus's genetic material, and with no evidence they were still infectious, experts say the findings don't reveal anything new about transmission.
Does it mean that COVID-19 is spreading from person to person through aerosols? And I would say definitively not. It doesn't mean that.
The idea of airborne spread is scary because it would mean someone could catch an illness after an infected person left a room. Highly unlikely with COVID-19, says Dr. Alison McGeer.
If this were usually or most commonly transmitted by the airborne route, then we would know it by now.
That's because viruses that are truly airborne are extremely contagious. A prime example, measles.
If we had an outbreak of measles and we spent non-immune healthcare workers into those rooms wearing a mask, if they spent an hour in the room, they would all get infected.
That hasn't happened with the thousands of healthcare workers around the world treating patients with COVID-19. So instead of worrying about getting the virus through the air, experts say, we can protect ourselves by continuing to follow public health rules, such as physical distancing and hand washing. Nicole Ireland, CBC News, Toronto.
A team of healthcare workers have created a space online to share stories from the front lines of the pandemic. These voices include doctors, nurses, custodians, and flight attendants. As Talia Ricci reports, the goal is to help people feel connected through their experiences with COVID-19.
I'm a palliative care physician.
I'm a community occupational therapist.
I'm a registered nurse.
I'm a clinical speech and language pathologist.
My name is Arnav Agarwal. I'm an internal medicine resident physician at the University of Toronto, and I'm one of the founders of Faces of COVID. So Faces of COVID is a collective space for individuals on the front lines to share their stories with each other and with their communities.
I think what has been challenging is just really honestly just seeing people be more vulnerable, seeing people more isolated, seeing the people who really in times of pandemic don't have anybody at this point. And I think that's been really hard to see.
I evaluated someone, and the recommendation at the end of the assessment was that he should go home and self-isolate. He then volunteered information to me saying, well, doctor, I'm actually homeless and I live in a shelter. And so if I go home right now, I'm not going to be able to self-isolate. So you know what I'll do? I'll go to the streets so that I can keep my friends safe and healthy. And while I was absolutely moved by his concern, I was distraught at the inequity that I saw and felt in that moment.
One experience that really put things into perspective for me was having a patient that was relatively young and very, very ill with COVID. And to see that this individual was very, very sick and was, by all accounts, generally healthy prior to this, it was very heartbreaking to see.
In a time where we're challenged to stay connected with our patients and one another and our families, it's so important that we can come share the story, know that others are going through it as well, that we're all in this together.
I hope this is a reminder to us that there is a human aspect, a compassionate aspect of this pandemic, and that's actually what ties us together.
Cheers for a man who finally got out of the ICU at Humber River Hospital. After the break, the story behind this heartwarming video. Stay with us. We're coming right back. A Toronto man is recovering after a terrifying fight against COVID-19. He spent weeks hooked up to a ventilator, not knowing if he would survive. Well, tonight he's sharing his story and video of his emotional send-off from the hospital with our Natalie Kalada.
It's a moment Hassim Abdallah wasn't sure would ever come.
I always have a fever and I always have a cough, and all my bodies was itching, like weak, a little bit of pain all my body. It was like that.
And it got worse. Diagnosed with COVID-19, the father of 4 was sent into intensive care at the Humber River Hospital. For 2 weeks, Abdallah was hooked up to a ventilator.
For the ventilating and the oxygen, and there is a lot of hard things that I cannot describe for.
Then on Friday, good news. He was moved out of the ICU with a send-off from the hospital.
Oh, it makes me cry. First of all, I'm gonna thanking for the ICU unit, everybody of them, the nurses, the doctors, every of them. And secondly, I'll be thankful for the recovery room that I've been there.
His victory over the virus has been watched more than 5,000 times on Twitter. Today, the president of the hospital saying in a statement, having a moment like this where a patient comes off ventilation and becomes well enough to leave our ICU is incredibly exciting and restorative for everyone.
There was a grateful, I cannot describe. I cannot tell. If I try to tell, I cannot finish until tomorrow.
And for the 53-year-old, there will be a tomorrow. And that's really something to celebrate. Natalie Kalada, CBC News, Toronto.
Good news there. The City of Toronto announced it will open a second COVID-19 recovery site on Friday for people who experience homelessness. The new downtown site will be able to hold up to 250 people who test positive for the virus. This announcement comes as advocates organize a drive-by protest, saying the city and province need to do more to help our most vulnerable.
We have thousands of people still stuck in a shelter system where there is not social distancing. There's no ability to stay within 2 meters away from people at all. We know that there's outbreaks in close to 10 facilities at least, although we know that there really is not anywhere near adequate testing being done. There's a simple solution. There's housing there. They're dragging their heels. Now they're threatening to clear people out of tents and encampments when that's the only safe option that people are actually trying to take charge of their own safety and do. So we felt, honestly, I'm appalled by that.
The car caravan protest hopes to shed light on the issue of housing that has been heightened because of the pandemic. The protesters want the government to move more people into hotel rooms or housing as soon as possible, implement harm reduction services and safer supply programs, provide adequate PPE to staff and residents, and implement more screening and testing at shelters. A group of faith leaders also calling on the city to do more for people experiencing homelessness, with more than 100 religious leaders signing a letter to the mayor asking for action. Now, during these times of isolation and physical distancing, playing sports with others is nearly impossible. To fill the void and stay connected, a group of friends and relatives created an isolation dart league. As Jason Vio shows us, the players stretch from coast to coast.
Triple again? Playing darts in the basement isn't a lonely sport anymore, and Travis Bondi takes the Isolation Dart League seriously. So much so, he cut out a chunk of his basement ceiling.
My ceiling's kind of low in my basement, and I was having trouble hitting double 20. So that's the top number without the ceiling coming into play. So I knew right away it had to be scrapped. If I was going to take this serious, the ceiling had to go.
The virtual league is made up of 18 friends and family from Windsor, Toronto, and Montreal across the country to Halifax and Kamloops, BC. They connect online 3 times a week to play darts and socialize.
Yeah, when this whole thing first started, a month ago sort of thing, it was tough finding positives in the middle of a pandemic.
They say it's pretty easy for any group to get started. Find that dartboard in your basement, dust it off, find a spot on your wall to hang it up, and then connect with your friends and family, set up your camera, and then take your shot. Some even use dining room chairs and stacks of books to ensure the camera captures the full board.
I legit get nervous before matches, so it is pretty intense.
But it's much more than fierce competition. After matches, spectators join the video chat.
Great match, guys.
Which often carries on for hours.
I think it's awesome, like, especially in times like these where, you know, we're kind of craving some sort of connection as well as some sort of athletic, quasi-competitive, you know, void that needs to be filled.
And the competitive spirit is palpable, especially since the league is in the midst of May Mania. It's their version of the college basketball phenomenon March Madness that was canceled due to COVID-19.
Normal March Madness has Selection Sunday, so we had a Zoom call where we unveiled the whole bracket and who's the number 1 seed, who are they playing.
There's even a board of directors to govern play and a constitution that spells out the honor system.
It's almost like it's one big joke, but everybody's taking the joke super serious.
In the end, they hope this is the start of something new, a virtual dart league that goes beyond the bullseye and hopefully lasts past this pandemic. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
More people are relying on local farms to supply meat after large-scale processing plants have shut down due to the pandemic. But small-scale farmers are having a difficult time keeping up with the overwhelming demand from new clients. As Omar Dabagi Pacheco tells us, some farmers are already starting to run out of meat.
At Arc Acres, Amber Payne's cows graze on Greeley's endless pastures.
For the last decade, that's all we've ever wanted is to, have everyone wake up to how important localized food is.
But for a small grass-fed operation, slow and steady growth is the only business model. So recently, when large-scale processing plants shut down, a deluge of customers came knocking almost overnight.
It became a problem because as a livestock farmer, it takes a long time to scale up your production to keep a large amount of meat flowing through.
Now she faces a problem.
What I've just put in my freezer 3 weeks ago is gone.
Does she try to keep her loyal customers happy or try to take on new ones? Until now, she's tried to do both, but she's already had to slaughter animals whose date with the abattoir wasn't scheduled until fall.
Also, they're going through smaller, it's not quite as much meat.
At this rate, she's going to run out in a month, and big meat suppliers have already stepped in to fill the void. Over at Mariposa Farms east of Ottawa, farmer Suzanne Lavoie thinks there's plenty of business to go around. When the pandemic closed restaurants, Mariposa Farms lost 125 clients.
Within 24 hours, we lost all our clients.
So they started delivering their pork and ducks to Ottawa locals.
Yes, we are so busy.
A case of 20 duck breasts used to mean one delivery. Now it means about 10 households.
So I work 10 times more. That's basically it, because it's 10 times the packaging, the billing, and the deliveries.
She's not worried about running out, but she is getting customers to adapt.
People will have to learn to use the whole animal. Right now, I'm going to slaughter some pigs, and people want a tenderloin. But sorry, there's only 2 tenderloins in a pig. Okay? So,
as for the long term, even meat farmers are advocating for some balance.
It would be nice to introduce a little bit more of vegetarian. I sell meat and I say that, but if you look at sustainable agriculture and sustainable economy and the future of the planet, I think that's good.
Omar Dabagi Pacheco, CBC News, Ottawa.
What's all this talk about frost warnings, Colette?
I know, Dwight. Here we are. You know, I was mentioning earlier that usually by the end of April, that's kind of our last frost for Toronto, but it doesn't mean that risk isn't there. And it's kind of interesting as you get into May, the chances drop off. By the time we get through to the week of May 10th, it's about a 33% chance or less that we're going to see a temperature dropping to 0 or below. It's interesting that that's the 10th because on the 9th, I have a forecast temperature that is dropping below freezing, but they just kind of statistically line line up. But these areas that are in the blue over towards the Niagara region and Hamilton included in this as well, we do have that frost advisory tonight. You know, there are little tricks that some folks, obviously, if you just got a plant you put out, you can bring it back in, or you can wrap some of your tender vegetation. But for some of our farmers and some of the crops, there's not a lot you can do. One of the tricks they use in Florida, for example, for the orange trees is they'll actually spray them, because the energy that's generated when the ice freezes around the fruit, actually that generated energy heats and keeps the fruit from freezing. So for our farmers that do have certain tricks, maybe not that, now's the time to be thinking about that for tonight in those areas. It's 12 degrees right now, the current temperature. Hamilton at 13, Windsor 14, Sarnia at 10 degrees. Mount Forest, you're coming in at 11 degrees at the moment. Up into cottage country, there were some beautiful numbers in the mid-teens today for some of the highs. High pressure clearing those skies tonight. That's often the sort of situation we have where we get into frost developing and we don't have the winds kind of mixing the atmosphere. And then we go towards tomorrow and things change. That high is going to move off. An area of low pressure pushes by, but it's to the north of us. So some scattered showers are certainly possible, more so later in the morning and into the afternoon hours through the GTA and to the north and west of us. And then this core of colder air wants to move in. It's going to take its time. It's not here Thursday. It is here by Friday, and it sticks around into Saturday. That's when we could have that record low for Saturday morning. For tonight, though, where we're looking at the freezing, Hamilton, St. Catharines, very close to it, a little bit above freezing elsewhere, around 2 degrees for the city. And then the highs tomorrow of 11 to 12. And again, if you do need to be going out for anything essential, then you'll need your umbrella there. But look at Friday, 5 degrees. Friday night, so this is Saturday morning, -2. The record set in 1966, Dwight, is -2.2. So we're definitely flirting with that. I don't know why we'd want to, but we're flirting with it.
That's a good point. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
A University of Windsor professor is on the front lines in New York City. She's running a field hospital there, staffed by Special Forces medics. It's named after a Navy SEAL medic who died. Katerina Georgieva spoke to her about why she felt she had to say yes to the assignment to command the hospital.
We have a really talented crew of clinicians who have been Special Operations Forces medics, so Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Special Operations Aviation. They are providing patient care that is absolutely phenomenal, compassionate, very patient-centered, and they are fantastic to work with because they are used to hardship tours. They're used to being in unfamiliar environments. They have a good sense of humor. They have great work ethic.
What is it that propelled you to, because you live in Ontario now, what propelled you to go to New York and meet that call of duty?
Well, when I was a baby nurse and I was fresh out of nursing school, 9/11 happened. And a friend of mine took me up to New York, and I was seconded to the FDNY as their medical support for one of their specialized teams. And when this pandemic really started to emerge, and I saw how New York City was just struggling. Their medical system was struggling. I was seeing my nurse colleagues on TV that were having a really, really hard time. And, you know, I knew that Ontario would need help, but having been in New York as a young nurse during 9/11, I felt like I had to be back here.
What are you seeing on a daily basis at this field hospital?
So we receive patients who need a bit more time to heal before they go home. And because we're a field hospital with all of our specialties and clinicians right here, we are able to accelerate their process of going home, which is really, really gratifying. And we have a nautical bell outside the hospital as an homage to Ryan Larkin, who was a Navy SEAL medic. And when patients leave, they ring the bell quite loudly, which is great because my office is a couple floors up, kind of over the bubble a bit. And so sometimes, 8 or 10 times a day, I'll hear that bell being rung, and it's the best sound in the world. It seems trite because we hear it all the time now, but we really are all in this together. It's probably the only human experience in my lifetime where the entire world is going through the same thing at the same time. And that's a great equalizer. We're seeing what's really important: our families, our health, our neighbors, our cities. And it's going to be okay. It's going to be rough, but it's going to be okay.
For many healthcare workers, finding time during the pandemic to take care of their own mental health can be challenging. Today, some of those workers at a facility in Scarborough were given the opportunity to take a few minutes thanks to a mobile meditation studio. Take a look.
Hello. How are you? I'm Tracy. Hi, I'm Tracy. Jess? Meditation works. Our purpose is to bring a purposeful pause to people's day.
You may wish to roll your shoulders up toward your ears and down your back.
Right now, due to social distancing, we're only able to have the experience outside. So we literally turn the experience inside out.
Noticing if you can hear your own breath.
What I'm most excited about is all the residents and patients inside Providence who are not able to come outside today can tune in because my partner at Palmer Audio sourced us an FM transmitter, essentially like we're pulling into a drive-in movie. So inside, everyone will be able to listen to the meditations for the 2 hours that we're here at Providence today.
Perhaps deepening the breath just slightly.
I can't imagine the stress that they're under, and I thought this might make them have a little bit of happiness in their day. And it's something different. Everybody loves an Airstream because it's a constantly moving happiness mobile, right?
This is awesome. Like after I felt like I needed a bed because I'm so relaxed right now. It's great because then it gives me energy to go back and tackle the rest of the afternoon, it's very nice. It's very appreciative.
They so need a break, those folks. After the break, a royal first birthday.
Look, Arch. That's the cover. Let's go to the next page. Wait, listen, did you hear that? I heard duck sounds. Quack, quack, quack.
Quack, quack. Quack, quack, quack. Prince Harry and Meghan posted a video today to mark little Archie's first birthday. More on the PR push by the couple as they make a new home in Los Angeles. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle released a new video of their son today to mark his first birthday. But the social media post did more than just mark a happy milestone. It was also a show of support for a new reading program for the charity Save the Children. Kim Brunhuber has the details.
Let's go to the next page. Look, Arch.
For a couple defined by risk, this is as safe as it comes. After all, who could object to raising money for coronavirus relief on baby Archie's first birthday? But the Duke and Duchess of Sussex didn't forsake Vancouver Island for LA just to make videos for social media.
My sources tell me that that they are absolutely being shopped for projects, and they absolutely have price tags associated to those projects.
The protectiveness of their young.
Meghan Markle's first project, narrating a Disney documentary about elephants. But the next chapter, announced this week, promises to be more controversial, a book about the couple that could only have been written with their say-so.
The number one thing you want to do in PR is define yourself, particularly before someone else defines you.
Next, some speculate they could land a development deal with a major streaming company, but as producers, not actors.
Sitcoms and keeping up with the Sussexes, a la the Kardashians, ain't going to happen just yet.
Others insist anything's possible for a couple marketing themselves as royal disruptors.
And in order to compete in an environment that is constantly in flux is to take risks.
But for an institution built on tradition, there is a fine line between disruption and destruction.
They are entering down a road that could be a bloodbath to the reputation of the royal family and to really, for the first time, put it out for sale.
Experts say in the post-COVID world, a risk-averse Hollywood may bank on proven veterans. Here in LA, Meghan and Harry are likely not even the biggest stars on their block.
So they're going to have to move to the back of the line for a while.
The royal couple may have to do something they're unaccustomed to doing. Wait. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Los Angeles.
After the break, today's Frontline Hero. Stick around for that. We'll be right back. Today we are giving a shout out to an emergency room nurse at St. Michael's Hospital. This is Elena Cox. Her former colleague, Swanee Tobin, sent us a note about her saying she is a compassionate nurse who always puts patients first. Elena goes to work with an exceptional attitude and deserves recognition for her strength and resiliency. So thank you for everything you're doing, Elena. If you would like to share a story about your frontline hero, just send us a selfie-style video explaining why they are a hero to you. Tag us on Twitter or Instagram at CBC Toronto. Send us a message on Facebook or email us at torontotips@cbc.ca. One last check with Colette and her frosty forecast.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but we do have I can't wait till summer days where it's hot and you want a frosty to cool down. This is frost of a different type, though, of course. Frost advisory for Hamilton, Niagara, over towards Sarnia, Chatham, Kent, points in between along the north shore of Lake Erie there. For Toronto tonight, we're going down to 2 degrees, so not quite down to freezing, but getting pretty close with those mostly clear skies that we'll be seeing. And for tomorrow, we are going to see some scattered showers developing into the later morning and especially the afternoon hours. About 12 degrees, though, for our high temperature. Try to enjoy that. There will be some sun mixed in there with the clouds, too, in between the showers. And the reason I really want you to enjoy that is because after Thursday, we get into a couple of days where we are going to see some of that very cold air moving in. Just Friday, Saturday, Mother's Day, it warms back up, Dwight. So we'll do better by Sunday.
Thank you, Colette. The garden centers are open. We don't want any frost right now. That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Mike Wise has your next local news tonight at 11 after the National. We will see you back here tomorrow night at 6. Have a great night and stay safe, everybody.